So you're probably wondering, how did you end up going from a game like BDO to a game like Final Fantasy? Well, let me tell you. I was taking a break from BDO because I was burned out. Nothing exactly wrong with the game, but I was playing it for 4 years, and after 4 years I wanted to try something new. So one of my friends suggested I try out Final Fantasy XIV, and oh my god, I've been addicted to that game for the last 2 months. So much so that I've sunk a whopping 240 hours into the game already. 240 hours! That's 10 days! Hey, editing Astro here. So at the time of my edits, I've added an extra 100 hours into the game. I'm now at 350 hours. Crazy, right? I've enjoyed this game so much that I wanted to share my first impressions of Final Fantasy XIV and take you on a journey from the perspective of a hardcore BDO player trying out Final Fantasy for the first time. Okay, let us start with character creation. First thing I saw was 8 races to pick from. And at first I was so overwhelmed because I had so many options. For those of you who don't know, in Black Desert Online, you only get one race to pick from. And from there, your class is gender locked, so you don't even get to pick what gender your class is. After a long amount of deliberation, I decided to pick the Mikote. The Mikote is kind of like a cat-human furry class, and I thought they were the coolest. After that, I was sent to the class selection screen. Final Fantasy currently offers 8 starter classes to pick from that range from tank, healer, and DPS. Given my past experience with MMOs, I decided to play it safe and pick DPS, because I've made several messes when picking healer and tank. My final decision on a class was Dragoon, because I wanted to pick a highly mobile, fast attacking melee DPS class. And on top of that, we also got dragons. Dude, we got dragons! Dragons are so cool. Once I made my final edits on my character, I was ready for the world of Eorzea. Now let me talk a little bit about the main story and how you level up in Final Fantasy. The maximum rank in Shadowbringers currently is 80. The main way people get their first character to level 80 is by what is called the MSQ, or the main story quest. Yup, you heard me right. The main way you're going to be leveling is by questing. Before all you questaphobes click off, listen up. This is coming from someone who's allergic to quests in BDO. Honestly, Square Enix did a fantastic job with their main story quest. You'll hear a lot of people say that 14 plays out like a real Final Fantasy RPG. Frankly, I have to agree with them. Although the story may take a while to build up, it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in an MMO in a long time. There's a few reasons why I think Final Fantasy's story is really captivating. First would be the critical role you actually play in the story. In Final Fantasy, you are the main protagonist and the characters treat you like one. You feel a sense of importance because your actions have consequences whether they're good or bad. This is pretty hard to come by in MMOs these days. Take Black Desert for example. I don't think 70% of the player base even knows what the storyline of the game is. We just have a strong will to beat the hell out of anything we can find at a grind spot. Additionally, I would say that the writers are able to create a story that tugs at the heartstrings and creates emotional bonds between you and the characters. There's so much you get to know about these characters and you just can't help feeling connected as the story progresses. Lastly, I want to talk about the main antagonists of the story. It feels like we're chasing a bad guy who's not just a bad guy for the sake of being evil. Some of these villains have a legitimate reason for being evil, and at times it makes me question, are we even the good guys? Like, are we doing what's right? It makes me think and wonder because their reasons are pretty solid. Honestly, it's no wonder the community loves the storyline so much. Next, I want to talk about Final Fantasy's combat system. Many people will complain that the early levels of Final Fantasy's combat is quite slow and boring, and I would have to agree with them. When you're leveling up a character, you pretty much have 1 to 3 skills that you're going to be using on a 2.5 second global cooldown. If you don't know what a global cooldown is, It's when you use one ability, you have to wait 2.5 seconds until you can use another. Understandably, you can see how the combat will be slow. However, as you start leveling up, you gain access to something called OGCDs. OGCDs are really cool because they allow you to use abilities outside of the global cooldown. This creates a more intricate system where you're trying to weave in OGCDs between the global cooldown. So that's where the skill of the combat system actually comes in place. Once you hit level 80, you gain access to a fully fleshed out rotation, which takes quite a while to master. And on top of that, when you're in a boss fight and you're dodging mechanics and trying to weave through the boss's abilities, using that full rotation becomes very difficult because some classes even have positional abilities, which means you do more damage if you're at the flank of the enemy, which is to the right or left, or behind the enemy. Overall, I would say the combat has a very slow start. However, if you give it a chance and you work on your character and you level up, you will see how rewarding it becomes because of how in-depth the system is actually. Last thing I'd like to mention about the game is how awesome the Final Fantasy community is. While leveling through the game as a beginner, not knowing much, the community is extremely helpful and always willing to help me out in any way they can. When I mess up in dungeons, they're always like, "It's alright, you'll learn, this is what the mechanics are, don't worry about it." People are just really helpful and they want to make sure that you enjoy the game and you have a good stay. I can't say that for some of the MMO communities I've been in, so this was an absolute breath of fresh air for me to experience. Of course, every once in a while you will see your bad eggs because that's how every game works, but for the majority I would say that there are so many kind and helpful people in this game. It's definitely a game built to play with other people and experience with other people. That's something I didn't really get in BDO because BDO is more of a single player MMO. It definitely lacks group content, so when I came to Final Fantasy I was super surprised and happy because a lot of the stuff I can do with other people. When it comes to dungeons, raids, trials, or fates, and fates are basically like open world objectives that everyone works on together. I'm always doing stuff in cooperation with other people, and that's something that makes me really happy about Final Fantasy. So if you are interested in giving Final Fantasy a try, I highly recommend it. The one thing I will say is that it may take a while to push through the initial part of the game, but once you get past that, it is extremely rewarding and so much fun to play. Currently, there's a free trial that leads you up to the most recent expansion. The most recent expansion you have to pay for, but pretty much 75% of the game you get for free and you can go through, and it's hundreds of hours of just pure enjoyment. So to be honest, there's no real downside of giving it a try. Anyways, I think I'm going to call the video here. This was just my initial experience on the game. I definitely want to do more content on Final Fantasy as there's a lot I want to talk about, but we shall see. Thank you guys for watching this video and I'll catch you next time.